Okay, I guess we are now online. So thank you everyone for joining this talk. I'm Nikola Babajanov, and I'm an open source management consultant for Bosch Digital, together with my colleague Marcel Kurtzman, who was also my co-speaker for the talk that we had earlier today for Hello World Plus projects for benchmarking SCA tools. Now we put together this presentation for you guys regarding the Eclipse Apoapsis project. It is basically regarding open source based software compliance, composition analysis at scale. And we'll briefly go through basically the history and the background of the project in itself, how it came to fruition, what was the idea behind it, all the information regarding the current status of the project, what we do, how we do it, and probably this will also help you to contribute as well. Currently, the whole idea behind this is, as you can see on this slide, is everything started with the OSS review toolkit. So that was basically the foundation of the project as of today. And the OSS Review Toolkit project and the ORD server are basically two projects that are working together in collaboration. Currently, all the developers for the ORD server project are also maintainers of the ORD server. And as I've already mentioned, it is a vast collaboration between the two projects. And now the ORD server is basically the foundation of our Eclipse Apoapsis project that we'll delve into more detail in a bit. So if you're really interested into whether that would be just general information, you want something more detailed and specific, or you want to really get the grips of every single project, you can simply follow the QR codes and yeah, you'll get what you really need to find there. I'll specifically focus on the Eclipse Apoapsis today, but we'll also talk briefly about the ORD server and the OSS review toolkit. So a bit of information or data regarding Eclipse Apoapsis and its ORD server is, as I've already mentioned, is a collaboration with the OSS Review Toolkit, and it's based on it. So it provides you with a recursive dependency analysis for more than 20 packages as of today. In the past, there were just a few, but with the time passing, the developers actually integrated more and more package managers. It allows you to integrate several vulnerability databases. So there is integration for several licenses, copyrights, and snippet scanner. It has the option for customizable compliance rule set that particularly is useful for basing this on your organizational needs. And what you need to do from open source management perspective is basically create your customized rule set and use the tool to run scans of whether it's open source or closed source project, it doesn't really matter. It also, if you attended our previous talk, we have a showcase of what really the results are when you have a successful scan of a project. So one of the many reports that you get are SPDX and CycloneDX, basically machine-readable SBOMs. Then you can either feed into dependency track or use with any other software that, in that regard, would help you to showcase your dependencies in a better way. The core functionality is extended with Kubernetes integration. There is a REST API to trigger, scan, and manage data, Keycloak integration for integration and role management, and a central database to enable data analysis across platforms. On the right side, you will currently what you're seeing. This is what the developers of the ORD server are currently working on. So this is basically the ORD server UI. It's currently in its, I would say, initial phase, but generally you can have a better visual of not just relying on the scan web app report that you get from successful scan that is produced by the tool, but you can also use the UI to visualize that, whether that would be your dependencies or the packages that are part of the project that is being scanned with the ORD server. And as I've already mentioned, the ORD server developers are contributors to ORD, and the projects work in close collaboration. So moving on to specifically why we gathered here today is the Eclipse Apoapsis. Why Apoapsis? We've had this talks in the past about the name in itself, and we had several ideas. You can chase Marcel in the whole track if you're really interested behind the thought process regarding the name of the project as it is today. But it comes from the general term from whether it's astronautics or astrophysics, whatever you want, however you want to put it. But generally, it means that this is when one object is orbiting another, this is basically the furthest that it's been from the object that it's orbiting. And in that regard, we'll later come into why we specifically chose this name is really relevant when you later on think how things are going and what we're actually doing in the project. So again, you can follow the QR code if you're really interested in who is contributing, who are the committers, what's really all about into a greater detail. But here we have this interesting notion is that the Apoapsis is the good opportunity if you want to transfer to another object's orbit. And that's a really nice segue to the next slide and what we basically did in the past, and what we are currently doing, and what we hope that we will be doing in the upcoming months and years. A bit about the background and why I said this is a great segue of moving from one object to another is, as I mentioned, the Apoapsis is the point that it's easier to switch from one orbiting object to another. And how is so? The whole idea with this is that in the past we started with OSM automation for Java Maven projects. Then we moved to JavaScript NPM projects, embedded systems, and we're really focusing now on trying to do open source management automation for embedded IoT Linux systems. And what we're showing here today is basically our trip through space, if you want to look at it in that way, is every single project that we try to automate its open source management framework was considered basically us orbiting around that project, collecting data, collecting knowledge, collecting know-how of how we can implement what we learned to the next project that we really need to automate. And in that regard, we try to showcase basically us being this pioneers in a rocket traveling through space and orbiting one object after another. And as soon as we are done and we are satisfied with the maturity that we achieved, we move to the next one. What we also try to do, and this is why we mentioned embedded IoT Linux systems, is we find it more and more difficult to actually find one single tool that does all. And this is what we mentioned. Probably the other similar talks today already mentioned that. Currently, with the current scenario of how things are going and how tools are developed, there is not one tool that you can really focus on doing open source management automation, for example, for embedded IoT Linux. This is why we've focused particularly on that mission, because the tool heavily relies on integrated or implemented package manager support, and for most, it doesn't exist. This is why we initially started with Java Maven. It was like most common, most widely adopted in our company, and it was easier to get the knowledge and know-how of creating this automation for such a project. It was also one of the first package managers that was supported historically, and later on, as I mentioned earlier, now more than 20 package managers are supported. So if you go through the ORT server or the OSS Review Toolkit documentation, you can actually get a list of the all currently supported package managers. And it's a quite easy setup. You can also install ORT locally on your system and test it out with a testing project of your own. So moving on with the overview and the planned outputs is, as I mentioned, Marcel and I currently, we are part of this top level that is the process level. So the project in itself contains of basically the two levels that we showcase here, the process level and the technical level. The technical level is basically everything revolving around the ORT server. And the process level is the document collection, whether that would be generic architecture, whether that would be use case collection, blueprints that we collect in the project that I'll showcase in a bit later. But basically these are two streams that are complementing each other, and they try to produce a common output. And that common output was first to match your needs to available solutions and jump to process definition immediately by using blueprints or use cases or existing generic architecture, or already use the documentation and everything relevant for your use of the ORT server. And in that regard, whether that would be a reference implementation, the document collection is done in Markdown, and I'll showcase how that looks in a bit. But moving on, this is how the whole initial concept started. On the right side, you see basically this blocker that we had in the past regarding, if you can imagine, like an online shop, whether that would be an app or whatever, that you have a certain filter that you can use, and the more criterions that you add to that search, it limits your results. And if you try, for example, to search for men's clothing, but then you add a certain size, and that particular size you try to search for shirts only, you're provided with just a small portion of what you can really need and use. And in that regard also, by using that, we had this idea that if someone really needs to implement a successful open source management automation and successful open source management program, by using the tools, we need to collect blueprints and we need to collect data and use cases that people could easily implement without having the hurdle of going through the same steps that we've already did. And the whole point is to be able to reuse something that's already available and it's publicly available. And if, on the other hand, you already have a blueprint that you want to contribute, feel free to do so. And going back, how basically you do this online shopping is you find a match. And if you find a match, it's easy to use. I'll show it in a bit. But whether that would be an existing solution or birds of a feather, whether you have a solution that you want to share, that is creating this generic architecture model is to help people in finding the better way to do things, and the better way to automate, and the better way to use a specific process or a blueprint. And yeah, that's basically it. And if you focus on different search criterions, you have different results. But the blueprints that we try to collect and the information that we have so far is really focused on being really easy to use and have a wider adoption to a generic company, if you can imagine. So usually the companies would have their own specific setup and their own specific requirements and compliance framework and whatnot, but we try to be as generic as possible in terms of using these blueprints in a way that you can adjust them and implement them directly to your specific setup. And moving on is basically this is the actual representation of this online shop that I just talked about. It goes into several details, several 4 levels, and these 4 levels are applicable based on your needs, and what we currently found that it's the main way of how open source management frameworks currently work. However, you can mix and match, and that's the whole idea here. So, for example, for the supply chain view that's on the top, you can actually go through the Eclipse Apoapsis guidance page, and you can go through that level, find your problem space. In the problem space, you will find information for example, I'm a developer that needs this and this, or I'm a open source officer that has a certain problem and I want a solution for that problem. And it works like that on every single level. As I mentioned, we try to keep the structure as generic as possible so it's widely applicable. And then if you need to do some specific setup based on your company's requirements or on your own, you're really free to do so. And in that regard, as I mentioned, it applies to every single level. However, you can mix and match the different setups and scenarios that you have in the structure. And here is an example of what I've just mentioned. So for example, you're a product owner or a product responsible, and you want to have a blueprint for software component lifecycle. So you go to the Eclipse Apoapsis guidance page, you go to part B where all of the setups are stored, and you pick that section that's relevant for what you really need. And from there on, whether you will focus on the problem space on the generic architecture or the blueprints, that is completely up to you. However, the blueprints is really our focus as of now, and we try to collect as many blueprints as possible. So if you have a blueprint that we can use, feel free to contribute. As I mentioned, the QR codes at the beginning, the few at the end that you can actually use to go to that page, review it, and even if you have some productive feedback, even critique, we accept it. We are open to that. So if you review the structure and you have something like an idea how this could be really improved, feedback to Marcel, to myself, or the other maintainers. And in that specific scenario, it goes through the blueprints for software management on product and service level. And from there on, when you click it, you'll have a list of blueprints that you can actually use. Whether that a single specific blueprint is something that you really need, that is completely down to your own necessities and requirements. And the same goes for the other example that we have in the current slide deck is if you're an open source officer and you want to have a blueprint for software management on a portfolio level, you go again through the page structure, you will find the blueprint that you need, and you from the list of blueprints that we currently have, that would be basically what is shown on the page. And whether it's this or, for example, you need a blueprint for software development monitoring, again, basically the logic is the same. We try, as I mentioned, we try to be as generic as possible in a way that the information is not really hidden by a few walls or just more and more information. It's easy to navigate and easy to get what you need. And for example, I mentioned the software development monitoring, whether that would be a blueprint of how to use ORT or scan code or Scanos or any other tool that you might use for software composition analysis, you will find it there. Another note that I made earlier is that there are not many blueprints as of now. We try to contribute as much as possible. However, if you're really willing to donate your blueprints or to just contribute to the project, feel free to do so. And we would really appreciate to have more and more information on reusability and people being able to use the blueprints or the problem space information that could be useful to actually navigate, and people coming with specific issues that we don't have currently blueprints for, but we can actually together try to create a blueprint. And this is something that we also do, and we do in our day-to-day work, basically, is if we work with a specific customer and that specific customer has a unique issue and we spend days and weeks and sometimes months to reach a resolution, then this resolution is actually the blueprint that we try to add to the project and be useful to other people so they don't go through the same hurdles and the same topics that we went through, and also they don't spend time wasting their efforts and resources in trying to resolve something that we can actually provide resolution for, or at least the template of what's usually to be done in a way to resolve a certain issue or a certain problem. And that comes from the different roles in an organization, and with different roles you can have different problems, and with those different problems then you need different blueprints or templates that you can resolve a certain problem. And moving on, this is basically an example of a process template, and a process template specifically for the software component lifecycle process. As you can see, this is generally the start of the blueprint for the component lifecycle process. We really didn't want to go through much of the details that are the information for the process itself. This is the diagram that shows the basic process description that shows a basic component lifecycle process. You have the typical roles in a software component lifecycle process. These might be company specific, but we try to again base it on our knowledge and our experience with our company and the companies that we work in internally and externally. So usually you have the management, the open source officer, the product responsible or the product owner, an OSMR that's usually an open source management responsible who is nominated, someone from the project team that's really deep down into the details of the project itself. A source code auditor and a curator. Whether that would be a full team or just a single person, that's really down to the size of your organization and the needs. And what we really do is if an open source component needs to be integrated to a project, it goes through an integration approval. Then after it's reviewed and approved, it goes to the development process, and the development in itself is part of the development monitoring. And the development monitoring, as you know, could be a really long process. However, each company, how they do their development monitoring is based on, again, their compliance framework, the tools that they use, their policies and requirements. And from there on, that particular component as part of a project goes through the contribution approval, and from the contribution approval, it goes through to the maintenance monitoring. Then again, as I mentioned, each blueprint like this, if you can see at the very top, the process scope is not a company specific, so you can really add your organization process scope, what it really is, what it's about, how basically your company does this, and if it's a derivative of a process like this or it's something completely different. In most cases, this is like the fundamental process or the fundamental level of a software component lifecycle process as we know. However, as I mentioned, each company has a unique structure, and it might be not be applicable in the way that it is now, but it might become applicable as you take basically the blueprint and you customize it in a way that it really fits your needs. And to that, what I really wanted to say is and I believe I said a few times until now, is we try to collect as much as possible, as much information as possible, specifically blueprints, for the specific use cases that you have. And again, this call for action is, if you're really interested, whether you reach me or Marcel or someone else, or you can use the site to do so. If you really you have the idea to contribute and to provide information that we can really use and enrich this project, would really appreciate it. And generally speaking, that's the showcase that we wanted to do in terms of the idea behind the Eclipse Apoapsis. So now a few minutes for questions, if you have any. So that was it. If not, I know it's been a long day, but yeah. And if not now, if you find me in the whole track, we can talk about this in a greater detail, or if you want some specifics. So, okay. Thank you.